My name is Tom Maddux, and I'm coming to you from Bay Harbor Church of God in Brunswick, Georgia. And I'm excited to be talking to you today about Christian leadership, specifically the course of Christian leadership at Lee University. It was my great privilege to have this course and discuss it with some of you, and some of the topics that we discussed. We read through Eric Geiger's Design to Lead, a great book that talked to us about leaders having to have conviction, and without conviction that nothing else can take place. And today's leaders need to have a conviction and stand up for what they believe in. As Christian leaders, we need to stand up for the Bible, rightly divided, and the person of Jesus Christ and who He is in our lives. And without conviction, we can't move on. In the church, we need to have the ability to change cultures. We see a lot of things in the church and wonder why it is they do the things that they do. And sometimes churches are stuck in ruts and some of the dogmas and beliefs of a past generation. All of these things come to play when discussing Christian leadership. We also need to understand that within the church we have to have constructs or systems that we need to have in order to move people into leadership. The discipleship process itself is a great way of creating leaders and giving them skills that they need in the workplace and in the marketplace in today's culture. We also listened to and read Peter Nordhaus and his book Leadership Theory and Practice, where he took us through a variety of approaches to leadership. He did a great job of talking to us about traits and skills and behavioral approaches, situational approaches, authentic leadership, and most importantly, servant leadership, and as well, adaptive leadership. We talked about ethics and gender and culture and how those all affect Christian leadership and leadership in general. We also talked or listened to the TED Talk from General McChrystal, and I really enjoyed that. A humble servant, one who has served his country, and something that I can relate to because I served my country. I certainly wasn't a general, and just to listen to that fine man talk from the vantage point that he did really impressed me and showed me a lot. He is one that was not afraid to make mistakes, and when he did make mistakes, he wasn't afraid to lean on those who he needed to lean on. He was one who would take his time to listen to not only advisors, but to those who were in the field, those who were in the trenches, those who were placed in his charge. And I really appreciate that. And that's a good lesson to us as Christian leaders. We need to be willing to listen sometimes to criticism. Sometimes it hurts to listen and hear what people say about you, but it's pretty good for us to sit back and listen to that and discern whether or not we need to make changes. Sometimes we do need to make changes, and we need to realize that it's on us, and that the people will tell us that we need to make those changes. Sometimes it's just a simple approach or something simple, and it can be easily changed. I love what the book said about servant leadership, and that servants put the good of followers above their own self-interests, and they build strong relationships with others. They're empathetical and ethical. That means we do things that are above reproach. We don't get called into question, and if we do, our lives will prove the life that we live, and it will prove that we are who we say we are. I think that's important, especially today, and I know it's true in my own life when I've seen people who did things that were not in line with who they said they were. As a Christian, we're held accountable. We're not only held accountable by God, but we're held accountable by the people who view us. And if we say something, it is a witness as to who Jesus Christ is in our lives. And I believe that that should be our ethical approach to everything that we do. I love the example of Nehemiah. I wrote about Nehemiah in my paper, and it really shows us a great example of leadership. Nehemiah was a man who listened, he prayed, and he listened to God. He didn't do anything without God putting it on his heart. Not only that, when God did put the burden for his people on Nehemiah's heart, he did something about it. He didn't just stand back and do nothing. He did something. His burden was a conviction. It was something that caused him to move into action. That's important in our lives, and we have to understand that as leaders. We have to be people who are burdened. We have to be burdened for this world. We have to be burdened for the people of this world, for the people who are perishing. I think it's really important that we have that kind of conviction. But Nehemiah also shows us that you can't give in to criticism. We do need to listen to the criticism sometimes, but sometimes the criticism comes from the enemy, and we don't need to give in to that. And we need to understand and discern the difference between good corrective criticism from the people and from the Lord, of course, but also the criticism that comes from the enemy. We need to be able to move past that and not let that affect the job that needs to be done. We also need to rejoice in the small victories. Nehemiah did this, and it was a great example for us to follow. One of the things that was very interesting to me in this course was the discussion about culture and how that different cultures hold different things in high esteem. What we see in America as great leadership characteristics are not exactly what they would have in a foreign country. Japan, for example, or Europe. These traits that we find desirable are not necessarily desirable in other countries. They did find and do the research and found that there are some universally desirable leadership attributes. They are high in integrity. Every person who is a leader should have a high level of integrity. That means doing the right thing always, no matter who's looking or if anyone's looking. Also, we are to be charismatic and value-based. Every leader around the world should have some type of value base and have a concern for people. And also to have those interpersonal skills, be able to listen to people, be able to communicate with people at all levels. One of the things that we saw in one of the talks is the ability to communicate at all stages of a movement. And that was a very good talk and a very good example. And leaders do need to be able to communicate at all levels. But they also showed us some undesirable attributes. And those are obstacles to effective leadership. And they are a person who is asocial, malevolent, and self-focused. We can't be focused on ourselves. I love the example that Paul gives in Philippians chapter 2 is having the attitude of Christ. Though he was God, he did not cling to equality with God as something to cling to. And that's pretty huge for us, and we need to understand that Jesus washed the saints' feet, and we need to be willing to get dirty. We need to be willing to do the dirty things and plug the holes and realize that it's not all about us. One of the major things I find about leadership is that many people can do different things, and a leader is just part of the equation. They are no more important than the follower. They are no more important than any other member of the team. They are a part of the team, and they need to see things that way. It's important to understand that as Christians, we have a responsibility to be leaders in our families, in our communities, in our homes, in our workplaces, and all over. We have something that the world is looking for, and that's the answer of Jesus Christ. And in order to do what we need to do, we need to be men of prayer, men and women of prayer. Another example of what we learned was the gender differences. I have found myself in many situations, both in the Marine Corps and in business and in the church world, where women are wonderful at what they do. For us to not perceive women as great leaders is a terrible travesty. And we need to look at women in the right place, in the right context, and understand that God created us all equally, He did create us with different missions or different jobs to carry out, but He did create us in His image, and that is hugely important. And we need to respect each other. Just to leave you with a couple of things that I find important in leadership, and I want to try to live up to in my own life, and that is when given the opportunity, step up. Nehemiah was the cupbearer for the king. Matter of fact, cupbearer for an enemy king. And the time came and it was important for him to step up. He could have stayed. He could have stayed in the kingdom and stayed back and watched his people suffer, but he stepped up and he did the job. We must be willing to listen to those in our charge, listen to those who give wise counsel, and be able to act upon that. We need to be willing to make changes and recognize that we don't have all the answers. And I think that's huge. When we walk into that position of humility and understand that we're just part of the puzzle, then we will do a successful job in leading others. God bless you.